How much Bitcoin do you think the average person could save up today to be considered a millionaire within 10 years? Be real.
Within 10 years, so that would be 2032 or
Sure.
2020, 2033.
And I say within 10 years, you know. So whatever the top
Yeah.
is.
Okay. Okay. So if we say 2025 will be a top, 2029 will be a top, 2033 could be a top. So we'll pretend like it is. So 2033, I would say the top could be somewhere in the.
Welcome back, everybody, to Altcoin Daily. Today we are joined by the man, the legend, friend of the channel, representing Bitcoin Miami 2023, Brandon Green. Brandon, how are you doing today?
Dude, I'm doing great, Aaron. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent. Now, for the folks at home who maybe didn't see our interview last year, introduce yourself to the Altcoin Daily audience. Brag a little bit. Tell us about you.
Yeah, sure. Well, so I got into the Bitcoin space in 2017. Literally have been working at BTC Inc., Bitcoin magazine, Bitcoin conference ever since. And yeah, I mean, have grown up with the space a lot. So, it was my first job out of college. Was a real hustler, but didn't know much about business and how to, make things successful. And learned a lot of lessons going through all the bull and bears. So, we're back in the bear, but that's fine by me. It's a better time to build.
Totally. Let's jump right into it, Brandon. How bullish are you on Bitcoin long term?
I don't think that there's like a way to like properly articulate how bullish I am. I mean, the truth is like if Bitcoin plays out in the way that we think it will, then it's an entirely different paradigm. Like you can't measure it by kind of the way that you've measured society or money or human history. Really, I mean, this is an inflection point. This is the ability to create a like value system that unites the entire world around like a common language. And a common value metric. And so someone in the other part of the world who's creating value, building something that advances human civilization, that value is captured in the Bitcoin's overall value that I'm holding as well. And so I see upside from that. My purchasing power increases because someone across the world created value. That's the kind of thing that aligns us to go up the Kardashev scale and become something greater than we've ever been as a human species. So yeah, tremendously bullish. Tremendously bullish.
So, why are you so bullish on Bitcoin?
Why am I so bullish on Bitcoin? Well, I mean, I think that there's a few different answers to that. Number one, I'm bullish on Bitcoin just because it has all of the necessary kind of requirements of a decentralized currency, a currency that ultimately the entire world can unite around. And so obviously it is decentralized in and of itself, right? Like no one can control it, and it's censorship resistant. No one can stop you from using it. Kind of the things that people talk about all the time, right? The reasons why you're bullish about Bitcoin is the reasons why everyone's bullish about Bitcoin. The real trick is being able to take that, first understanding and then apply like the next couple of steps and just be like, okay, well, if Bitcoin's what we say it is, then like, what does that mean? And it means that you have the future currency that every single human being is going to use, period. So, and maybe even beyond, right? Like, this can become interplanetary. This can become, it probably wouldn't get outside of the, 10-minute hash horizon that currently with block times we are limited by. But that would certainly get us to the moon and make an interesting dynamic with Mars if we were ever to colonize Mars as well. So, yeah, I mean, it's a new paradigm.
I'm getting hot over here with you talking about that. Before we go any further, Brandon, let's pivot to the Bitcoin conference. You're representing the Bitcoin conference. Tell us about it. What can we look forward to with Bitcoin Miami 2023?
Yeah, so Bitcoin Miami 2023, the Bitcoin 2023 conference, we're looking kind of holistically at the industry and like mask off, gloves off, man. It's been a bear market and a half. Like we have seen some of the stalwarts of our industry absolutely crumble or turn out to be complete frauds. And so a big part of what I think the conference is going to be this year is a kind of like reality check to everyone like, hey, are you still here? Are you still alive? Are you still working in the space? Like, are you still building? And then the second question of really, I guess three questions. Second question of what happened, right? Like, how did we allow all these companies, all these actors to go off and create, terrible products or predatory products or fraudulent products? And then the third question is, where do we go from here? Like, how do we start rebuilding the entire industry from a standpoint A of like Bitcoin focused, Bitcoin only, and B with the principles of Bitcoin at our core. So things like transparency and decentralization, and a bit more of a robust and anti-fragile sort of economy at its core. I mean, like that's what we need to be doing. And the fact that we ever strayed from that kind of vision as a industry, I think, is the reason why we had such a bad bear market. And so, that's going to be, a big theme. And then I would say outside of that, we're going to have the cast of Bitcoiners that you want to come see, the people who are kind of leading the charge in terms of thought leadership, in terms of adoption across the world. We had a conference in Amsterdam back in October. It was our first foray kind of into the European market. We got to meet a ton of amazing European Bitcoiners. So getting them to come into the US and kind of talk more about what they're doing and what they're seeing, and vice versa, getting more US folks to go abroad and kind of meet other Bitcoiners around the world. Like, this does not stop in Miami. Miami is just a launching point for people to go on their journey, learn about Bitcoin, adopt it in like their own use, and teach other people about it. And by doing so, the mission grows and the platform grows, and ultimately we achieve our goals of hyper Bitcoinization.
I'm psyched. I can't wait to go. Use code Altcoin Daily, 10% off, linked below. Come hang out with me. Come hang out with Brandon. Now, Brandon, let's pivot back to Bitcoin itself. How much Bitcoin do you think the average person could save up today to be considered a millionaire within 10 years? Be real.
Within 10 years, so that would be 2032 or
Sure.
2033.
And I say within 10 years, so whatever the top is.
Okay. Okay. So if we say 2025 will be a top, 2029 will be a top, 2033 could be a top. So we'll pretend like it is. So 2033, I would say the top could be somewhere in the 10 to really $100 million range per Bitcoin. And so, at that point, could you be a millionaire holding 0.01 BTC? I think it's totally possible. I would not be surprised.
0.1 BTC?
0.01 BTC.
Holy hell. And the price, the actual prediction of the price you said was 10 million, possibly?
Yeah, I think it could go as high as 100 million in one of these bull runs. It's totally possible. Like the real question, and again, this goes back to like one of these questions that we have as an industry. It's just like, what's our appetite for leverage, right? Because what we saw in this past bull run in 2021 was that there was, the classic mania phase, but that mania phase had basically been absorbed by paper Bitcoin. Circulation credit. The Bitcoin supply expanded in 2021 to serve the need of new interest in Bitcoin. And so because of that, what happened is people went leverage long early in the cycle. They're like, oh, we know this thing's going to rip. We're going to go margin long now. And then we're not going to sell any Bitcoin until it's time to sell here at the end. And so what that meant is that, those buys that they were basically pulling from in the future, they bought, but while there was still a ton of liquidity in Bitcoin, when people were still selling a shit ton of Bitcoin, and so it didn't have the impact on the price that the buys would have had if they were spread out across the entire bull run. And really, I say I blame. I don't blame him, but I think Elon had a huge factor in this, right? Like Elon got into Bitcoin, like tweeted, the inside in hindsight it was inevitable, whatever. Between then like January or early February. And this is a bull run that like was just getting started. It was supposed to be a mania phase in November, December. And so imagine if he had not said that and waited until November, December, and like all the Elon acolytes and all the media craze happened then. I mean, we would have already been running up to 70, 80K before he was even saying anything. So like that's where I think this past cycle was a bit of a difficult one to analyze because A, you had tons of leverage, and then B, you short circuited the mania phase early in the cycle. And so, if you're kind of looking a bit more historically, what you generally see is close to 100x from the previous bottom. So, going back, you went what, like 2020, or sorry, 2013. I guess we'll just go from 2013, right? We hit like 1200. You go back down, you trade around like 200 or 180, I think was the bottom there. And then we hit 18,000, 19,000 in 2017, right? So it's 100x, 180 to 18,000. You go back down, we've now hit a bottom somewhere around 15,000, let's call it. So if you 100x from the bottom from there, like I think 1.5 million in the next bull run is like not that crazy at all. I just think that like the demand is there. Like think about the world that is interacting with Bitcoin today. We have a world where the US dollar is losing its hegemony. You have countries who are deciding between, do I want to stick with the US dollar or do I want to go with the communist China regime? Those are my two options, right? Doesn't Bitcoin being this third apolitical Switzerland type option for a global currency already show its value? I mean, people are already holding gold. These countries are already accumulating gold. So, this is just one narrative, but I think nation states are going to get very much into the Bitcoin game. And, they have blank checks. They print money and buy things with it. So yeah, I could see it run up pretty hugely in the next cycle.
Wow. In the next cycle, I didn't expect you to be that bullish. I knew you were bullish, but not that bullish. But so just like, sum that up for me. So when it comes to thinking about the next cycle, if it hits over a million, or certainly in the future when it hits a million, 10 million, 100 million, what if only, where is that demand coming from? Is it coming from more Elons, more business owners? You mentioned some countries. Where does the demand come from?
Yeah, it's a good question. So like I think if you look at the adoption metrics today, let's say somewhere around 10% of like Americans own a meaningful amount of Bitcoin. All right. That's actually an undershoot based on what like Kraken and Coinbase data says of like their in Gemini, like their US users. But let's just say it's 10%. I think that's fair. It's not just about going from 10 to 90% US investors owning Bitcoin, but it's also about their allocation, right? So, most people who are sitting on podcasts in this point in the cycle, it's not that they've got 1% of their allocation, their network in the Bitcoin. They've got 100% or 70% or like something way higher. And so, where this comes from is not only the adoption of Bitcoin in terms of just like more people buying it and using it, but it's also about it becoming more and more of the financial asset that people are comfortable with in their own use in general. And so that's a huge aspect of the driver. Instead of 10% with 10% of their wealth in it, 90% with 90% of their wealth in it. Like that's where we're headed. I'm not saying it's going to happen next cycle, but that's where we're headed. And so then that's one factor. Secondly, you've got a lot of countries around the world who are flirting with central bank digital currencies. Nigeria is definitely one to be keeping track of. I think that the situation there is fascinating. To catch people up, basically, they've implemented their central bank digital currency and they've deprecated cash. They're saying basically you can't use cash anymore. You have to use their CBDC. And this is already a country that's adopting Bitcoin at a pretty surprising rate. And so, are people going to move to a like financial surveillance tool given to them by their government that it eliminates all like non-taxable markets, all black markets? You can't pay your babysitter with central bank digital currency without registering that with your tax. That's just not what people want, right? They want to get government out of their lives, out of their financial lives. And so I see tons of people in that situation moving to Bitcoin in a very meaningful way. And so like that's just a fast growing country. And then we're talking about companies, companies that do international trade as more and more Forex transactions become very difficult to navigate. Bitcoin is a settlement layer for just about anyone. It's a much easier way to do it. Don't have to go through any banks. Don't have to worry about anything getting seized. Like this, it's so much easier. It's a much more simple process to move money internationally if you're just an international corporation. And then you get to countries. I think all of these things are in play in the next cycle. I think you will absolutely see like another country, maybe two, maybe five, maybe 10, like maybe more, start holding Bitcoin on their balance sheet in a really meaningful way. So yeah, I mean, and that's on top of like, again, this like 10 to 90 allocation, right? El Salvador currently has, a decent slug of money, but, by no stretch, maybe like 10, 20, 70 mil, like somewhere in that range, like tens of millions of dollars in Bitcoin currently. They're trying to issue a Bitcoin bond for $1 billion, right? Like they're already looking at a 100x of what they're currently allocated. Plus, they have a growing GDP. Like, where are they going to store that the excess? They're not going to store it in US dollars. I can tell you that. So they're going to be buying more Bitcoin. So that's also a trend to be watching. So I don't know. There's a lot of different disparate threads, but that's kind of where I see the adoption coming from the next cycle.
So I don't know if you've ever thought about this. I'm sure I know people who own Bitcoin, own some, I think a lot of Bitcoin, more than 0.01, more than 0.1, I assume, I don't know for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But what is to become of those people if Bitcoin hits those big numbers? Is Natalie Brunell and Peter McCormick now the new, Elon Musk's and Jeff Bezos? Like, seriously, like the people who own like big chunks of Bitcoin now and will hold, do you ever think about like what's going to happen? Are they going to just be the richest of the rich?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you have to look at like, when we go to a number like $100 million in Bitcoin, right? Like in 10 years, bold claim, I know. But when you're looking at that, all right, that is a roughly what, 50,000x from here, 5,000x from here. I'm bad at math right now.
Let us
Let's
know in
say
the comments.
5,000x from here. And sorry if I'm wrong on that. So that would make the Bitcoin market cap somewhere around in the quadrillions. Is that right? Maybe like 2 quadrillion. So yeah, I mean, you're looking at a scenario where like the Bitcoin market cap is a bit divorced from current reality in terms of like how big it's getting. And the reason why I think that happens is because you're going to see hyperinflation of currencies. And so, it means like, to some extent, like both Bitcoin's value is going to be growing and the denominator by which we are measuring it will be shrinking. And so, it's hard to say like, what does that get you in terms of purchasing power in the future? Definitely a tremendously more purchasing power than you have today, but I don't think it's the same amount of purchasing power as if you had $100 million today. So, it's kind of the cop out answer is to say, I don't know exactly what that will mean for them and how rich they will be. But here's what I do know is that if you create a system in which the people who were non-consensus, contrarian believers in Bitcoin early on, right? And they poured their souls into kind of helping, increase adoption around the world. Those people have a certain set of values and a certain way of thinking that enables them to allocate resources in a way that society currently is not. And so the bullish case on those people becoming wealthy or the wealthiest folks in society is that they'll be funding the things that they think is important. And so that's refunding, how we do education. That's refunding how we do investments, which I think, you'll see a huge amount of investment into energy and energy security and renewable energy and, growing energy capacity in developing countries. And so I think that's going to be a huge thing. I think, governance. I think some of these people will kind of become the leaders of their local communities, and those local communities could be way more wealthy than what countries are today because you'll have like leaders who are willing to give back to their communities like that. So, it's an interesting kind of topic to explore in terms of like what do these whales look like in a hyper Bitcoinized world. There's plenty of dystopian takes as well. It's not too hard to imagine the classic "who will pay for the roads," kind of tropey things when you're talking about like a potential where all these people are bigger than governments, right? But the short of it is I think it will be a realignment of the values of society, and those values will be realigned behind what made Bitcoin succeed in the first place. And so I think that's ultimately a bullish thing for everyone.
Very interesting. You've given us a lot to think about. Altcoin Daily audience, for more on this topic and mining and energy and all sorts of aspects of Bitcoin, attend Bitcoin Conference 2023. Link below, information below. Use Altcoin Daily, 10% off. Brandon, thank you so much for coming on today. Give our audience any final thoughts, plug anything you want, plug the Bitcoin Conference, just final alpha for the Altcoin Daily audience.
Yeah, I guess my last thing I would say is this is the moment. If you've been paying attention to Bitcoin and you love it and you're excited and you're like, man, I want to devote all my time to Bitcoin, enter into the arena. There's never going to be a better opportunity to build a business in Bitcoin than the next year. You have tons of VC money that's been sitting on the sideline just from a macro perspective that needs to invest. And you have effectively a completely wiped clean slate of competitors across all sorts of financial product, companies in the Bitcoin space. This is the time to be, leaving your fiat job and looking at Bitcoin in a really serious way and coming in and adding your hands into the mix and building this entire industry with us. And I'm telling you right now, like the people who are going to be doing that, the people who are the leaders of this industry for the next decade, they're all going to be at this conference. They're all going to be getting investment. They're all going to be meeting their business partners. They're all going to be making hires at this event. And I really do believe that this will be an inflection point for our industry. And so you got to be there. Otherwise, you're just going to miss out on, the opportunity of a lifetime.
We'll be there, Brandon. Link below. Brandon, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much, Aaron.